Hi, and welcome to this episode of Little Sprout Speech TV. Grab your pen and paper because today we are talking about how to give your child a voice. So this is a topic, right, that I could talk about for hours on end, but I wanted to actually talk about this topic and answer a question that we had on our Facebook page last week, which I thought was fabulous. And that question was, is it ever appropriate, or when is it appropriate to use a speech device in place, or an app, for example, in place of speech therapy? I'm going to give you 3 tips, well, really 2 tips and then a piece of information at the end for our third tip that I think is going to really help drive home my thoughts on this topic. So let's get started. Like I said, get that pen and paper ready because I'm going to give you some great tips that you can put into action right now. All right, so tip number 1. I want you to think about this for a second. Answer this question. Do you have a child who is not speaking? Doesn't matter if they're 3, 4, 15, 25. If you answered yes, and this has been a long-standing problem or an issue where you see your young child is very frustrated because they don't have words to communicate with you and you're not usually sure what they want, then this is going to be a really great episode for you. So tip number 1 is to try a device. Okay, that's it. Try a device. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So if your child's not talking, you want to try a device. And what this means is, if you're working with a speech pathologist, I want you to ask your speech therapist if they think your child would be appropriate for a voice output device. It's called a VOD, or for voice output device, or speech generating device, an SGD. People call it AAC. You know, there's all kinds of shortened words, terminologies, jargon, yada, whatever. Doesn't matter what anybody calls it. It's all the same. It's basically a device that will help your child speak because it becomes your child's voice. So I want you to do a trial with one of these. This is something you can do if you have a speech therapist. They can contact the company and ask the company to do a trial with your child, or you actually as a parent can contact a company and request a trial. So that's something to do some more research on if that's something that you haven't tried yet, because there are a lot of children that have a lot of success with this. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 then is we're going to talk about one particular device, which is the iPad, and I have mine here. And I want you to try some apps. So one way to figure out if your child is really into using a device might be to use something like an app on the iPad. So I have here the Go Talk Now Lite, which is something that you can get very affordable. Something that you could get and learn how to use. They have a little help button here. Learn how to set it up and see if it's something that your child even responds to. And this is a more simple version of a device that can speak for your child, so it's a good place to start. And then from there, you can always try other apps. I encourage you to try different apps, not just go, oh, well, this one that she recommended didn't work, so, this is not the avenue we're going to take. No. Try different apps, because I'm telling you that your child will respond to something different than the next child. No 2 children are the same. That's just being human. So keep that in mind when you're going through this process, okay? And then tip number 3, which is really more of a piece of information and ties more directly back into the question from our Facebook page, relates to speech therapy and using a device or an app. So one does not replace the other, and I want to explain why that is. Speech pathologists work on more than just teaching your child to speak. I'm not going to go into all the details because there's so much nitty-gritty behind it. You would be like, I'm just going to sleep. This is it. This is boring. But the bottom line is you need somebody like a seasoned speech pathologist who knows how to teach a child to use a device like this in order to have success on it. That is important. And so my answer to, when is it appropriate, or is it even appropriate to basically just stop going to speech therapy because you're putting your child on a device or an iPad app that's going to become their voice? while that's fabulous and I completely encourage you to do it, I also encourage you to keep going to speech therapy, because that therapist should then be working on the goals they've set forward for your child, but using that device or the iPad app to help your child meet those goals, if that makes sense. Because basically all you're doing is saying, we've taken my child's voice, we've moved it over to this device, and that is what we're going to use right now as my child's main voice, since my child's really not talking right now. Now that said, one more piece of information that I find to be very super important is that the research shows that giving your child a device is not going to prevent them from talking. There's a chance that your child may never talk, and there's a chance that your child may talk 5 years from now, and there's a chance that your child may talk tomorrow. We just don't know. But the research shows using a device is not going to get in the way of your child talking. Your child will talk when they're ready to talk, if they're going to talk. And so using a device helps to make them feel less frustrated and helps them to communicate and get their needs and wants met now. And oftentimes I actually see that this leads to a verbal child, a child who then starts to use their voice within their own body to talk rather than the device as their voice. So I hope that helps, and I hope that puts your mind at ease a bit. Let's review real quick. Number one, if you haven't tried a device and your child is not talking, try a device. That's tip number one. Tip number two, test out different apps using your iPad if you have one, and see what resonates with your child. That could help you either choose a device or figure out which other app you might want to use as a main communication piece on the iPad. And number three is just to remember that you need speech therapy with the device. They go hand in hand, and it will not stop your child from talking. Using a device will not stop your child from talking. It actually can encourage speech. So I hope this helps. I look forward to talking to you guys same time, same place next week. This is Hallie Balkin signing off.